Hey, good afternoon to you. It is 5:06 here, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up this very hour, we'll be joined by the fabulous Victor Davis Hanson, senior fellow at the Hoover Institute, author of The Dying Citizen. We'll get his big picture perspective on the state of our country and what's at stake in the 2024 election. Few can vocalize it like he can. And you can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. The left is undergoing one of its panic attacks again this week. That seems to be a constant refrain. But they are again. They're panicking over a number of things. One of them is the left is super grumpy that Donald Trump had his bond amount lowered from an absurd $500 million to a slightly less absurd $175 million. Still a lot of money. But they're mad about it. They're super mad about it. It was an alleged crime that had no victims whatsoever, and they thought they could impoverish Trump. They could make him really poor, and that, of course, did not happen. In fact, with the announcement of his big social media company getting listed yesterday on the stock exchange, Donald Trump is now astronomically richer, at least on paper. His net worth has exploded. And Bloomberg says he's now among the 500 richest people on the planet. It's the first time Donald Trump has reached those heights, despite the fact that he's been a billionaire for many years. So the left's plans not going well. MSNBC's Tristan Snell, one of their legal analysts, was super upset yesterday that Trump's fortunes keep improving.
I mean, honestly, this is so infuriating, I don't even know what to do. I don't even know if I care what the process is that these judges are arriving at. Whatever it is, it's flawed. I can tell you that much. I mean, David put it well. This is a different process for this person. We have decided that he gets his own private court of justice.
Oh, yeah.
He has a private plane. He has private clubs that he lives in.
Yeah, who wouldn't want to be Donald Trump? He gets all the breaks. That guy has so much privilege. Everything is so great for Donald Trump.
Apparently, he basically fashioned himself his own private militia to try to take over the Capitol.
The psycho.
Now he's getting his own private system of justice. This is an absolute travesty. It would not happen for anybody else. That
guy's a tyrant. Keep him away from literally anything that involves responsibility over people's lives. Even going shopping for a family, don't let him do it. Dog watching, don't let him do it. That guy's out of control. It's totally absurd. There's no world in which Donald Trump should be fined more than Bernie Madoff for a situation where there are no victims in a situation that's not even a crime. The whole thing is insane. The whole thing is so psychotic. So that's MSNBC's take. For a more sober take on that particular story, Jonathan Turley had this to say on the Fox News channel. Take a listen.
I actually think they could have reduced this bond to virtually nothing because the amount set by Engoron was absurd. I mean, most of us drilled down on these figures and could not find a there. There were no victims. There was no money lost. You had people that loaned this money and wanted more business. And so this figure seemed to be just snatched out of the air. He connected it to a few properties, but it was very speculative. By reducing the amount, I think that this restores some element of restraint to the New York legal system. I think that the true sunk costs of this controversy has been borne by those who really wanted this thrill kill moment.
Yeah.
This did not played well with the public. I don't think it's played well with companies who were legitimately alarmed to see the New York legal system turned into this inescapable political vortex. And I think that the reduction will help assure people that there are still some adults in the room.
Yeah, it's like totally ludicrous. And Turley, I think kind of the conception in the media, the way that the broader media will treat that, well, Turley's on Trump's side here. I don't know. I mean, Turley's been critical of Trump about any number of things, but I think he's been eminently fair in his legal analysis here. And he's not the only one who says that. Yesterday, the Washington Post was quoting their legal analysts who were saying, this is a bad sign for that Engoron decision. This may have been an excessive fine. This is the kind of thing that may run afoul of the Eighth Amendment. It's really over the top. This is a deeply unusual moment. So there you go. You've got some rationality breaking through, a little bit of it. And of course, the left gets super angry about that. The left gets angry anytime there's even small deviations from their agenda. And that apparently includes this week NBC's decision to hire Ronna McDaniel to be a commentator. I can't even imagine why that would be that controversial on the left. Like, what? Okay. So you picked off another one. Another establishment Republican is joining the ranks. We'll do TV commentary. What's the big deal? Well, apparently over at NBC, it's a massive deal. It is so massive that all of the staff, at least the hosts and the hostesses who go on television, they've decided to become completely insubordinate to their own company. And they've been whining like crazy on the air. How could you do this? How could you do this? And now this, of course, started over the weekend. Chuck Todd went on the show he was fired from, Meet the Press, to complain that NBC had hired her. This is awful. How could we do this to our viewers? How can you lie to your viewers? Is that what you're really saying? Because you've been doing that quite a bit through the years. Do what? Hire a comms person, like a former comms person, of somebody who represented party interests? Those are the only people you do hire. Jen Psaki has an entire television show on your network. She came right from the White House press office. In fact, NBC negotiated with her while she was still White House press secretary. What in the world are you talking about? Nicole Wallace has a show on that network. She was a Bush comms person. And now she's, a beloved anti-Trump figure on MSNBC. So, and John Brennan, of all people, the former CIA director, John Brennan, who has lied to the American people about the CIA's abuses of the American people, that was well known and once criticized by Democrats, but even before he was hired by NBC. It's way more offensive than hiring Ronna McDaniel to provide some insight into the inner workings of how the RNC works. Like, what? And yet they complained. Here's the Blaze put together this helpful supercut. Here's all the MSNBC hosts losing their minds.
I'll be joined by former RNC chair Ronna McDaniel in her first interview since stepping down as party chair. In full disclosure to our viewers, this interview was scheduled weeks before it was announced that McDaniel would become a paid NBC News contributor. This will be a news interview, and I was not involved in her hiring.
I think our bosses owe you an apology for putting you in this situation. And look, there's a reason why there's a lot of journalists at NBC News uncomfortable with this, because many of our professional dealings with the RNC over the last 6 years have been met with gaslighting, have been met with character assassination.
We weren't asked our opinion of the hiring, but if we were, we would have strongly objected to it.
NBC News, either wittingly or unwittingly, is teaching election deniers that what they can do stretches well beyond appearing on our air in interviews.
I mean, they may as well have announced that they hired Adolf Hitler or something. Like, what? What is this? Ronna McDaniel? You smash every fire alarm because you hired Ronna?
To peddle lies about the sanctity and integrity of our elections, but that they can do that as one of us, as badge-carrying employees of NBC News.
There is an easy way to avoid the controversy NBC News has stumbled into. Don't hire anyone close to the crimes.
She literally backed an illegal scheme to steal an election in the state of Michigan.
An entire network dedicated to the idea that the 2016 election was stolen.
That is the type of experience that Ronna McDaniel brings to the table. And that experience does not get us to a deeper understanding.
Jen Psaki of all people included in this.
Anything in the public debate.
I want to associate myself with all my colleagues, both at MSNBC and at NBC News, who have voiced
Rachel Maddow.
Loud...
What does she make? What does Rachel Maddow make a year? It's like $30 million or something that she makes a year to work a part-time gig at NBC. She's not even on full-time. She got tired of doing television, so she just appears every so often and then spends the rest of the time fly fishing, which sounds great. That sounds like a great life, but what? And the woman who was retailing all of the lies about Trump for years, the Russia collusion stuff, like, putting all of her theories up on the yarn board and telling people that she's established the new connections and this is what they really mean, and acting like she's dug through everything, and she was just advancing conspiracy theories.
And principled objections to our company putting on the payroll someone who hasn't just attacked us as journalists.
She's a journalist now. Do you hear that little sleight of hand? She's a journalist. Does she say that on a routine basis? I'm a journalist.
someone who is part of an ongoing project to get rid of our system of government.
To get rid of our system of government? I don't remember that. Do you remember Ronna McDaniel trying to get rid of our system of government? We've had some interviews with Ronna McDaniel. That never came up. I feel like if that was on your priority list, it might be one of the top things you might discuss. Hey, I'm looking to get rid of the entire system of government. Anarchist. Ronna Romney McDaniel. All right, here's the update on that wild story today. So all of this whining going on by all of these NBC News hosts and hostesses has led to this news this afternoon. NBC News is prepared to now drop ex-RNC chairwoman Ronna McDaniel after Rachel Maddow and Morning Joe revolt. According to the New York Post here, they're citing Puck News. Puck News is a publication, I think, that's run by a guy called Dylan Byers. He's a long time ago, he was a CNN media reporter. They say in this write-up of the reporting, NBC News plans to drop former RNC boss Ronna McDaniel as a paid contributor after network stars, including MSNBC primetime headliner Rachel Maddow and the co-host of Morning Joe, blasted the decision to bring the Trump-backing Politico on board, according to a report. The network has not made an announcement, but one is pending, according to Puck News. The Post has sought comment from both NBC and McDaniel. Earlier on Tuesday, the Wall Street Journal and Variety reported that NBC News executives were meeting to discuss what to do with McDaniel in the face of public opposition from their network stars. How do you solve a problem like McDaniel? How do you get rid of her? Maddow, MSNBC's most bankable name, demanded on her Monday show that NBC executives, quote, reverse their decision to hire McDaniel. Yeah. So the lunatics are running the insane asylum, in case you were wondering. Rachel Maddow goes on the air and says it's time to fire the people you've just hired to work here. The fact that Miss McDaniel is on the payroll at NBC News is, to me, inexplicable, Maddow said during Monday's broadcast on her weekly primetime show. According to the Journal, McDaniel was hired by NBC News editorial chief Rebecca Blumenstein. The decision to bring McDaniel aboard was backed by a woman called Carrie Butoff Brown, who heads political coverage at NBC. Rashida Jones, the head of MSNBC, reportedly backed the decision to hire McDaniel, but in the face of the uproar among her stable of stars, she let it be known that they would not be required to have her on their shows. McDaniel's reportedly looking to hire a lawyer now, according to Puck News. Maddow on Monday went on to bash McDaniel as, quote, someone who hasn't just attacked us as journalists, but someone who is a part of an ongoing project to get rid of our system of government. You wouldn't hire a made man like a mobster to work at the DA's office, right? You wouldn't hire a pickpocket to work as a TSA screener, Maddow concluded. No, but you might hire a groper to do that job. Earlier Monday, Joe Scarborough and his wife Mika, who co-hosts MSNBC's Morning Joe, pledged on the air they wouldn't invite McDaniel to their program. They called her a, quote, anti-democracy election denier. The decision to hire McDaniel sparked anger due to her backing of former President Donald Trump. You know, what if this is like a huge scheme just orchestrated by Ronna McDaniel to get herself back into the good graces of the right? You know? Just like, because look, there's not a lot of people on the right who are like, yeah, Ronna McDaniel. No, most people are like, bon voyage. Thank you. Goodbye. Like, someone else should come in now. And of course, there is a new RNC leadership team. And the hope is that they'll win elections, right? That's the whole point. It's not personal, it's business. The hope is that they'll win elections. But Ronna McDaniel just got martyred in the course of 48 hours by MSNBC and NBC News. They hire her to be, I assume, kind of an occasional sort of, establishment commentator. All right, now we go to Ronna McDaniel. Ronna, what do you think of this? Well, when I was in the head of the Republican Party, this is how we spent the money and whatever. This is how elections are run, just to give her basic assessments. Now this is blown up into a full-blown ridiculous scandal. In case you're wondering, if you're a lefty and you're listening to this, in case you're wondering if the networks that you normally listen to, MSNBC and others, have their priorities straight, pay attention to this saga. Doesn't this tell you everything? They're so jacked up, they think Ronna McDaniel is a controversial hire. Who are the real fascists here, would you say? What a bunch of fascists. Yeah, it really tells you a lot, NBC. All of its staff members freaking out that Ronna McDaniel, of all people, may get a chance to say something on TV. Let me take Sam in Alexandria, line 2. Sam, good afternoon. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Hey, thank you, brother. I appreciate the opportunity. You know, as I heard this story this morning, I laughed. As you know, when it snuck out about she's probably going to be turn around and fire her, and I thought, what happened to DEI? I thought diversity makes us stronger. I thought we're all supposed to be inclusive, but all you guys have just showed, as we all know, that you're intellectually and professionally bankrupt and corrupt. You can't sit across from somebody and have a challenging conversation. You just need people that will be not sounding boards, but allow your, sounding mirrors.
For sure. And they're not interested in being challenged at all. They don't really care about representing broad swaths of the country. They don't want anybody to come in. I wouldn't say, under normal circumstances, I wouldn't say, Ronna McDaniel represents Trump voters everywhere, because obviously that's up for debate. But having somebody who does represent them, they wouldn't do that. That's the last thing they want. Having somebody like my next guest, can you imagine if Victor Davis Hanson went on NBC and just had a normal conversation with them? They wouldn't know what to do with him. He's too smart for them. And they'd be flabbergasted that their worldview is crashing down around them and they have no defense of it. So, of course, they just exclude him entirely. That's the way they operate. Sam, thank you. Yeah, Sam's right. They always say diversity is our strength. Not that kind of diversity. We don't... Not different views. What are you, crazy? That's not happening. Hold on. Victor Davis Hanson in all of his wisdom. Up next here on WMAL. Hey, good afternoon to you. It is 5:35 here, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. You can join us, as always, at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. With each passing day, the polls move further and further in Donald Trump's favor all across the country, and especially in those swing states. Massive changes among the American electorate, non-white voters moving very rapidly towards Trump. And this is all bad news for Democrats and Joe Biden. But as they receive bad news and they become more desperate, do they become more dangerous? That's the conversation I want to have now with my next guest, the great Victor Davis Hanson, senior fellow at the Hoover Institute and the author of The Dying Citizen, How Progressive Elites, Tribalism, and Globalization Are Destroying the Idea of America. Sir, great to have you back with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
This is an interesting time. This seems like, Trump has one of the best hands he's ever had electorally heading into the 2024 election. Does it make you nervous when Democrats have this much control of our institutions, what they'll do to try to stop him?
Yeah, it does. You saw what they did in a minor incident, like the MSNBC, NBC hiring of Romney. And you can see that they don't feel that fair play or symmetry or reciprocity applies to them at all. So I think they're on a moral quest where any means necessary are justified by their superior moral end. Mm-hmm. That's true of them in general, but especially true with Donald Trump. I mean, they don't see anything wrong with Atita James tweeting and gloating about the increasing interest by the day. In their way, it's just justified that Donald Trump is their enemy, and anything that hurts him is fine with them, regardless of the propriety or with the legality of it.
Anything goes. They talk so much about how much they love and respect democracy and want to fight for democracy, but when it comes down to it, actual ballots across the country, they have been fighting like crazy to preclude Donald Trump from appearing on those ballots. And the same is true, by the way, for third-party candidates like Robert F. Kennedy Jr. The Biden campaign is undertaking an active effort right now to prevent RFK Jr. from appearing on ballots. So when they say the words democracy, what do they really mean?
Well, democracy for them just means kind of a referendum on a pre-decided or pre-selected or pre-agreed on agenda. And their way of thinking that the left should have permanent power and then it should be ratified every once in a while with an election. But when you look at, for them, it's always a process. I think the Republicans and conservatives are sort of naive. They don't understand. They think that everybody's open-minded and enlightened and they're going to make rational choices. But the Democrats are very cynical. So when they lose control of the Supreme Court, pack it. Go to a justice's home, intimidate him at home, get out in front of the Supreme Court and threaten Gorsuch and Kavanaugh by name, as Schumer did. When they are unsure about the Senate, and then get rid of the filibuster if you're in the majority, or bring in 2 new states if you can. If the blue wall crumbles and suddenly the Electoral College is an enemy rather than a friend, it's get the National Voter Compact to nullify the Electoral College. And that's how they think. And you can see it for all their very wide views among the Democratic Party, but not really when it comes to discipline. The Republicans are all over the map. They can't even get a speaker. They get people that leave their office prematurely and endanger their tenuous hold on the House. Not the Democrats. If somebody's in surgery, they bring them out on a stretcher to vote. And it's that ideological discipline and rigor and intolerance that is really frightening. There's a long history on the left of doing that, but we never have quite seen it in a country like this before. Not with Carter, not with Clinton, not before like this.
Well, they're true believers for sure. I'm not sure if it's ideological belief so much as it is the belief in power on the left. Meanwhile, on the right, it feels like the true believers, the people who are in line with the voters, are unfortunately kind of few and far between. Is that your impression, that there's only a small number of Republicans who actually believe it?
I don't know. Sometimes the Republican Party, I don't know what it is, but they kind of sleepwalk through. They don't understand that all of our major institutions, from a Google search to the Super Bowl halftime to the major media, Silicon Valley, social media, New York Times, NPR, network news, foundations, corporate boardroom, academia, you name it, they're all overwhelmingly progressive. And the progressives see that they have a message that doesn't resonate. It's contrary to human nature. This redistributionist, totalitarian, take from one, give to another, let the government adjudicate. People don't like that, but they historically they get it through the institutions. That so-called long march through the institutions, and the Republicans kind of wake up and they think, wow, the media is biased. Wow, entertainment and Hollywood are biased. Wow, even ESG is dominating the corporate boardroom, or gee whiz, DI is even in corporations now, and they're always a day late and a dollar short.
They kind of let it all happen to them. And then meanwhile, the left uses those institutions, as you point out, pretty effectively to advance their agenda and their talking points. An example of that was this weekend on 60 Minutes. There was a big Leslie Stahl interview where she was talking about disinformation in the United States, the big problem of disinformation. So many Americans believe lies. Why do they believe lies? And the expert to whom she went was a woman called Kate Starbird from the University of Washington, who's a so-called disinformation expert. What 60 Minutes did not disclose is that she's federally funded, that she's received millions of dollars in taxpayer money in order to lead censorship efforts against the American people by pushing the social media companies to censor Americans. She's also an advisor to the Department of Homeland Security on that very same effort, which is to try and stop so-called disinformation, misinformation, malinformation. And it goes right to your point, Victor Davis Hanson, where you've got the federal government, big media, non-governmental organizations, federal tax dollars, all moving in the same exact direction to advance the left's agenda while misleading the rest of us. And the right seems to just sit there with their hands in their pockets.
Yeah, I think they also have this idea that's very ossified. It's a calcified idea that the Republican Party is the party of the rich where all the money is. If you look at the top fortunes in the Fortune 400, or you look at zip codes or congressional districts by income, the Democratic Party is a bi-coastal elite that has most of the capital in the country, $9 trillion Silicon Valley alone in market capitalization. They have all of the wealthy elite endowments in the university. They have all of the foundations. And the Republican Party, it's good, but it's a middle-class, nationalist, populist movement now, and they should understand that it's being vastly outspent, not to mention the institutional disadvantages that it suffers from. So they perennially get outraised. I mean, in 2020, I think Trump was outspent 3.5 to 1. And that looks like it's going to be the same today. And they know that if Mark Zuckerberg decides that, he's going to put another $419 million in 2024 to absorb the work of the registrars, they're not going to be able to match that, or they're not even going to know what's going to happen. Under the guise of COVID, they just sort of sleepwalked and said, oh, Democrats are going to all the key swing states, they're changing the ballot laws. The result will be 30% at the election day polls, not 70% traditionally, and the error rate or the rejection rate of ballots will dive by a magnitude. Oh, that's just the way it goes.
Yeah.
And then the day after the election, they say, wow, we didn't have any idea of the effect of mail-in balloting.
Right. And money and election administration are huge, but you also, in the end, you do still need voters. And it seems to me that Republicans have one of the best opportunities of our entire lives. I'm not certain it's because of the work of Republicans so much as it is because of the failings of Democrats. But what do you make of the giant demographic shift we're seeing right now in the country? You kind of pointed it out, which is that you've got the richest people in the country who are all captured by Democrats. They're all supporting the Democrats. Meanwhile, the rest of us are all kind of moving in the direction of Republicans and really away from those Democrats who've become so radical.
Yeah, I live in a community out here in rural California. It's about 90% Mexican American. I've seen it gradually drift toward the center, if not the conservative, but now it's sudden. And it has a lot to do with the substitution of race or ethnic brand by class. By that I mean a lot of Latinos and blacks are looking at their elite the same way East Palestine looks at Palo Alto. That the white working class wised up about where Clinton and Obama were taking the Democratic Party, and they defected in the millions because the transgendered issue was not their issue. Abortion on demand was not their issue. Appeasement was not their issue. Vast government spending was not their issue. But you're starting to see that now with the Latino and black communities. They think, wait a minute, defunding the police made my life worse. My God, I have a lot of worries other than a third's biological sex. I need natural gas stove. I need cheap gas. I don't want to worry about some theoretical climate change guy at Berkeley or Princeton telling me that I've got to do this and do that. And so they're really looking at their own party elite, especially minority elites, and they're saying, Joy Reid doesn't have nothing in common with me. She's got a lot in common with her other anchor women, but nothing in common with me. And I think that's a radical shift of a class consciousness again, rather than just tribal consciousness. And it's going to help the Republicans a lot if they can capitalize on it. They should campaign in every state, inner city, barrio, and talk about class.
Yeah, it could help a lot. And the trends seem to indicate that men are moving more rapidly than women are. In fact,
that's absolutely true.
In fact, James Carville is being quoted pretty rampantly this week because he just did an interview, I believe, with it was the New York Times. He did it with the New York Times. And he was talking about Democrats, and he was talking about how Biden has been bleeding black male voters. He said the following, quote, "A suspicion of mine is that there are too many preachy females dominating the culture of his party. Quote, don't drink beer, don't watch football, don't eat hamburgers. This is not good for you. The message is too feminine," said James Carville. "Everything you're doing is destroying the planet. You've got to eat your peas. If you listen to Democrat elites, NPR is my go-to place for that," he says. "The whole talk is about how women and women of color are going to decide this election." I'm like, well, 48% of the people that vote are males. Do you mind if they have some consideration? That was James Carville's assessment. He's getting a lot of backlash this week from people like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. What do you make of his analysis here?
Well, he's right. I think he's a little naive because it's not just females; it's elite, arrogant males too, in those rarefied circles. People don't like to listen to them either, and you can start to see a little bit in California even that they don't like to see some person who gets on the television and says we're going to let 90% of all the snow melt out to the Pacific because of natural riparian considerations. When you're a Mexican American guy who drives a tractor and needs irrigation in August when it's 105. And they don't like the tone. They don't like the accent. They don't like the tone. They don't like the milieu. And they just don't like to be talked down to like they're stupid.
Yes.
And that's what the left does now. It's a party of the degree, the people with letters after their names, with a lot of money, with a lot of pretensions. And they're kind of hypocritical, too. People think, well, you know, they keep telling us that we have to pay this much for gas, this much for electricity. But then you look at them, and they either have enough money to make themselves exempt, or they put their kids in private school, but they say unions are great for teachers. And they're starting to see that hypocrisy there's no better example than AOC. The way her personal taste, the way she lives, and the Marxist drivel that she promulgates is just such a disconnect that I don't think she resonates in the way that she used to either.
Well, I think you're tapping into the single most fundamental difference in terms of our political breakdown, which is on one side, you have people who think that there should be respect for the citizen. On the other, it's contempt for the governed. And I don't know, I don't know about, I can't speak for everybody, but I know when I'm being patronized, when I'm being treated with contempt, I recoil. I absolutely hate it. And you're indicating that there's a lot of people who feel the same way.
Yeah, I mean, by all means, people can't figure out Trump because he can be crude, he can be mean, he makes a lot of gaffes, but one thing he isn't is inauthentic. So when he has that Queen's accent, he wears that tie, whether he's with workers or poor people, he is what he is, and he doesn't pander to people. He just says it. And sometimes what he says is self-destructive and hurts the cause, but there's one thing that the left is fearful of him, and he's a billionaire that resonates with the lower middle classes only because he's authentic. It's not so much as his agenda they like, but even his agenda reflects sort of a empathy. He always says we're going to protect our farmers, our soldiers, our frackers. You never hear that from Biden or the left. It's clinger, irredeemable, chump, dregs. We're going to shut down coal. You're going to have to learn to code. Trump has been very good on that. He doesn't lecture people on what they have to do.
Yeah, he doesn't roll up his sleeves and put a cowboy hat on and pretend he's a farmer. No, he's always in the same outfit.
He doesn't change his accent like Hillary or Obama either. He doesn't do that.
No,
and he doesn't do what Joe Biden does, whisper and all that stuff. He is what he is.
Yeah, and people can smell it. Victor Davis Hanson, thank you as always. I really appreciate our conversations. Always nice having you on with me. Thank you, sir. Yeah, we're keeping our eyes out on latest out of Baltimore and the bridge collapse today. The Francis Scott Key Bridge going down 17 minutes ago. The New York Times reports federal investigators say they are beginning what could be a long search for answers about how that cargo ship ended up striking the bridge just minutes after it left the port of Baltimore. Very early Tuesday morning, the ship's crew had issued a warning that it lost power. They gave officials a very brief chance to stop cars going across that bridge, and they tried to evacuate the span before it fell into the river. 6 construction workers who had been working on the bridge, fixing potholes, they are still missing as of this afternoon. Divers, other emergency workers have been looking for them, helicopters as well out there. So there's a lot of answers to be had in the months ahead. Joe Biden stepped up to a microphone today at the White House and had some brief remarks. Here's what he said.
Good afternoon. Before I leave for North Carolina, which I'm going to do in a few minutes, I want to speak briefly about the terrible incident and accident that happened in Baltimore this morning. At about 1:30, a container ship struck the Francis Scott Key Bridge, which I've been over many, many times commuting from the state of Delaware either on a train or by car. Been in Baltimore Harbor many times.
Let me just pause on that. There are no train tracks. There were no train tracks on the Francis Scott Key Bridge. He's just making this up. I mean, I guess he's saying, he was in the vicinity on train tracks, but no, there were no tracks over the Francis Scott Key Bridge.
And the bridge collapsed, sending several people and vehicles into the water, into the river. And multiple U.S. Coast Guard units, which are stationed very nearby, thank God, were immediately deployed along with local emergency personnel.
And thank goodness for that. Biden would go on to say that he's calling for the federal government to mobilize financial resources, that is taxpayer money, quickly to try and get to a point where we can get this bridge rebuilt. I would presume that's going to take years. And to get this port open, such a critical port here in the United States of America. It's obviously a developing story even at this hour. I'm sure we'll have updates for you tomorrow. Stay with WMAL, the great one, Mark Levin, up next.